experienced only an hour or so earlier. Then I went on to read the Gospel according to St. Luke. Pastor Beverly has just read for us. Jesus had been at Capernaum, a city on the northeast shores of the Sea of Galilee. He traveled with his disciples and a large crowd, some 50 miles, to a little town called Nain. The name Nain means beauty. Nain is about 10 miles southeast of Nazareth, maybe about as close as between here and Urbana. Not far away from Jesus' hometown. A large crowd is accompanying Jesus as he comes near the town gate. Please, let's not misunderstand that this is some massive city with walls all around it. Might have just been a little piece of metal fencing with a rotary sign on it, and maybe a Methodist or Lutheran church, and welcome or Sutoma or something. Just a little something that said, you're about ready to leave the wilderness and come into Nain, beauty. And as he approaches, the first thing that Jesus sees, as we read in Luke 7, verse 12, as he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out. Wow. Will get your attention, don't you think, moving through the town gate of a small town, and finding that you're in the midst of a funeral procession. Remembering that Luke was a physician, his gospel account affords us details that some of the other writers don't provide. Specifically in this case, regarding the deceased and the mother. Luke includes, he was the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. Just in those short words, in that short phrase, we're given insight and entry into the depth of grief here. Not only has her only son died, maybe her only child, but at least her only son. She's also been living with the reality of the death of her husband. We don't know how long ago. In our common vernacular today, if there was an obituary being written about this young man, it would read that he was preceded in death by his father. And that this widow, this grieving mother upon the death of her only son, has been dealing for some period of time with the oppressive, the unjust, the emotional, cultural, and financial implications of being a widow, and now a widow with no son. I grew up in a small village just west of Toledo. And I discovered there, and maybe others have discovered in small towns and communities, that most everybody knows most everything about most everyone. In our town, our village, if I did something away from home, my parents knew about it before I got home. News travels fast in a small community. Such is the case in the village of Nain. As Jesus approaches the town gate, we read, a large crowd from the town was with him, with this widow. The town rallied around this woman and were processing outside of the city for a proper burial. The widow has no name that we are given, nor does her now lifeless son. And yet, through tear-soaked eyes, she can only watch as the coffin holding her son's lifeless body is carried out of their small town. Lest our 21st century minds imagine a coffin or a casket with sides and bottom and ends and a lid. This was very likely more like a stretcher or a wicker or reed mat that they were using to carry the body out of the town. Luke, when writing about Jesus' response to what he was seeing, uses what in the Greek language is the strongest word to describe the depth of emotion. Our translation today reads, and Jesus' heart went out to her. Doesn't get much deeper than that, that my heart comes out to you. One author said that it might be a feeling similar. Some of us have experienced this. I don't care to experience it anytime soon again. When you are on a roller coaster And then when the direction changes and it feels like your stomach is moved up into your throat, similar perhaps to what Jesus was feeling, the very center of his being was coming out to this widow on the death of her son, her only son. Then Jesus does something that culturally was forbidden. As the casket is going by, the body of Papa, Jesus reaches out and touches it. That was not permitted. Hence the reaction of the pallbearers. They stop. What's going on here? Doesn't this man know? This stranger? No indication that they knew who he was. He's walking into their town and he's touching the dead. But he's already said to the grieving mother, don't cry. I find it interesting to imagine the voice inflection there. Don't cry. Don't cry. And then Jesus turns to the lifeless body and speaks to it. Jesus speaks to the dead. Young man, I say to you, get up. As I was reading this in the early parts of Tuesday afternoon, brought back memories of my dear mother, now 4 years in the church triumphant, coming into my room on those school days when I didn't feel like getting up. Young man, I say to you, get up. And at least from how I understand this gospel lesson, this dead young man got up more quickly than did I on most of those school days. And Luke gives us this information. The young man sat up, and the Greek language there, the word used there, describes a hospital patient sitting up in the bed. The young man sits up, and did you see or hear the other detail? And he began to speak. Am I the only one who's saying, Luke, you give us lots of details. What did he say? What did he say? A young boy dead going to the grave, and he sits up and he talks. And Luke doesn't tell us anything. Well, maybe it's because that's not the point of the story. Young man, I say to you, get up. What did he say? What would you say? Or just as importantly, what will you say? I sat back in the chair, wondering, God, where do you want us to go this week with these lessons? As I pondered this centuries-old scene from the town of Nain, and still fresh in my mind was the funeral procession I had earlier led in front of the cemetery.